Imagine, a private jet lands outside Paris. A billionaire expects a quiet ride into the city, but instead of a limousine, men in uniform step forward. Monsieur Durov, please come with us. In a single moment, the founder of Telegram, the most private man in messaging, becomes the biggest headline in Europe. If you don't know Pavel Durov, he is the creator of Telegram, the app loved for its encryption, giant group channels, and reputation for independence. But that very reputation has now collided with French prosecutors. Social feeds explode. Is this about protecting privacy, or about crimes hiding behind it? Officials accuse Telegram of being a hub for scams, drugs, and illegal content. Durov's camp responds, the platform follows the law, removes illegal material, but cannot magically read encrypted chats. Then comes the heavy word, indicted. Not a fine, not a warning, an actual criminal case. Durov is released under multi-million euro bail and supervision. Society splits. But the story doesn't stop at the courthouse. Parents ask, is this app really safe for our kids? Experts debate, is it even possible to control encrypted networks? Entrepreneurs wonder, if a founder can be arrested for user behavior, who's next? This story isn't only about one man. It's a stress test for the entire internet. If governments hold platforms responsible for billions of user messages, will the web become cleaner or just quieter? Criminals adapt, while ordinary users may lose the very privacy that kept them safe. When Pavel Durov stepped off that jet and heard, "Please come with us," the whole world felt the line between privacy and control grow thinner. And here's the real question. What do we value more? Freedom of communication or safety under control? The answer doesn't just affect Durov. It affects all of us.
In the tech world, big scandals don't always start with loud headlines. Sometimes they start with a missing button. One day, Telegram updates quietly vanished from the App Store, and behind that silence stood Apple, Russia's regulators, and a global argument about freedom online. The backdrop was already tense. Russia had been trying to block Telegram for refusing to hand over encryption keys. Users were dodging the blackout with VPNs and proxies. And then Telegram claimed Apple was holding back updates worldwide under pressure from Moscow. For developers, it was a nightmare. Security patches stuck in the pipeline, new features frozen. Then came a short post from Pavel Durov. Apple hasn't approved updates for weeks. Russia's pressure is spilling across borders. We need to push critical fixes. The debate erupted instantly. Was Apple protecting users by following local law? Or enabling censorship by proxy? Meanwhile, the everyday impact was personal. A teacher couldn't get the update that fixed voice notes for her class. A newsroom waited on a feature for stable live broadcasts. Families across time zones hit lags where there used to be smooth chats. You didn't need a political science degree to know something was wrong. You just needed a message that wouldn't send. And then, almost as quietly as it began, the block lifted. Updates returned. The button reappeared. Telegram flew again. Apple stayed silent. Telegram moved on. The world kept scrolling. Why did this matter? Because control doesn't always look like a ban. Sometimes, it looks like a frozen update button. This story turned abstract debates, platform power, government pressure, privacy, into something visible on everyone's screen. It showed that the global internet is fragile when access to users runs through a single gate. And the lesson was clear. Independence isn't just about writing your own code. It's about surviving the places where your code collides with someone else's rules. Imagine waking up in the morning, reaching for your phone, opening your favorite messenger, and nothing. Messages don't send, channels won't load. And then you realize it's not just you. Across a country of 140 million people, the sound of conversation has been switched off. That app was Telegram, but Telegram was never just another messenger. For some, it was the family lifeline. For others, the newsroom of independent outlets. For many, the stage for ideas and movements. Its promise was simple: end-to-end encryption, a guarantee of privacy. Then the state stepped in. Give us the key, one single master key, so we can open any door we want. On paper, it sounded simple. In reality, impossible. For Telegram's founders, unacceptable. A standoff begins. Regulators demand, hand over the key or face a ban. Telegram refuses. The block button is pressed. But people don't give up. They adapt. VPNs trend. Proxies multiply. New mirrors appear faster than they can be shut down. In chats, the little paper airplane emoji becomes a quiet sign of resistance. It feels almost playful, until you remember why it started. From abroad, Pavel Durov declares, "No government will get a skeleton key to millions of private lives." Supporters call it a stand for digital rights. Critics push back. What about the criminals hiding in the crowd? And here lies the core conflict: privacy as protection for the innocent, or as cover for the guilty? Weeks turn into months. A ban meant to silence only amplifies the debate. People learn, one key for all isn't just a bad idea. It's dangerous. And then, almost suddenly, the pressure fades. The ban is lifted. Telegram survives. The paper airplane flies again. This story wasn't just about an app. It was a stress test for the entire internet. It showed that people will always find a way to stay connected. It showed that blunt force blocks break more than they fix. And most of all, it proved that user trust isn't a feature. It's the product. And the question still remains. If privacy collides with power tomorrow, what will we choose? Freedom or control? In the next story, you'll learn how a $1.7 billion dream of a new internet was stopped by a single phone call from the SEC. It's a story about vision colliding with law, about countdown clocks that never reach zero, and about what every founder should remember when building on the edge of tech and finance. Telegram was preparing for a historic launch. The TON blockchain, the Gram token, and a future of fast, decentralized payments for hundreds of millions of users. It was meant to be code over hype, utility over speculation. But the SEC had a different view. They looked at those private token sales and saw not utility, but securities. That's when everything changed. An emergency restraining order. The launch canceled overnight. Investors refreshing inboxes, engineers staring at court filings instead of node logs. In the end, $1.2 billion refunded, an $18.5 million penalty, and Gram never officially launched. Yet the code didn't die. Communities picked it up, forked it, and kept building. Telegram, the app, kept growing because the messenger and the blockchain were always cousins, not twins. And here's the takeaway. This wasn't just the fall of a token. It was a warning shot to the whole industry. In crypto, it's not enough to dream big. You need to time it right, structure it right, and prove you're not selling promises as products. So the question remains, when the next internet is ready to launch, who will be the one to press start and not be stopped by a phone call the night before? Sometimes the internet doesn't disappear because of hackers or server crashes. It vanishes because someone at the top decides to switch it off. In Indonesia, that's exactly what happened to Telegram. At first, it looked like a formality, a short notice from a ministry. But by evening, it was clear the government was preparing a full shutdown. The reason? Public channels spreading ISIS propaganda. The network began to blink out. News anchors spoke of radicalization, and the atmosphere grew heavier. Inside Telegram, alarms went off. Moderators tracked extremist content. Lawyers pored over orders. Engineers checked flagged channels. And Pavel Durov issued a statement that changed everything. He didn't argue, he didn't posture, he apologized. He called it a failure of communication, set up a hotline for authorities, promised to hire local language moderators. and the tone shifted. Politicians moved from asking, "Why did this happen?" to "How fast will it be fixed?" Takeaway: this story showed that the future of the internet isn't decided only by code or bold principles. It's decided by response time, local context, and the ability to admit mistakes. For governments, it's proof they can pressure platforms by demanding results. For users, it's a reminder that free speech without safety can't survive. And for companies, it's a lesson. Sometimes to keep the lights on for millions, you have to swallow your pride. And the question remains, can platforms of the future balance safety and freedom? Or will they always depend on someone else's switch? Imagine this. You open the App Store at lunchtime, type Telegram like you've done hundreds of times, and the blue paper airplane is gone. Not in search, not in updates. Nowhere. As if it never existed. Friends start texting. Do you see it too? Twitter explodes with screenshots and theories. So what happened in just a few hours, between breakfast and noon? To understand the shock, you have to remember what Telegram was at the time. Not just a messenger, a whole world in your pocket. News, fan communities, study groups, family chats, all stacked into channels and threads that felt limitless. And then Apple, the ultimate gatekeeper for every iPhone worldwide, quietly hit the brakes. The explanation came later. The ugliest words on the internet. Child abuse material. For Apple, that's a red line. If that content surfaces, no feature, no argument matters. It's not about convenience anymore. It's about principle. And so Telegram, along with its alternate client, vanished from the store. Pavel Durov's first response was cautious. "We've been alerted, we're strengthening protections, the apps will return." No defensiveness, no grandstanding, just crisis calculus. Acknowledge, fix, restore. And in the background, a bigger conversation ignited. How do you moderate encrypted platforms? Private chats are private, but public channels are not. The tools to fight the worst material, databases, user reports, rapid takedowns, must be relentless without turning every single message into a target. Within a day, Telegram returned to the App Store. Errors on iPhones disappeared. For most people, it was just a glitch. But for those paying closer attention, a lesson was clear. One company's button can shift the balance of power on the internet. The aftermath was quieter than the headlines. Telegram added new filters, tightened reporting, refined its pipelines. The app looked the same again, but in the minds of users, that invisible trust meter was already altered. Why did this matter? Because this story revealed the emergency brakes of the modern web. It proved that child safety isn't a toggle you can switch. It's the principle that decides whether an app survives in mainstream ecosystems at all. It reminded users that convenience is built on invisible vigilance. It showed founders that independence has limits when distribution runs through someone else's door. We tend to think apps are eternal, but in Brazil one morning Telegram was simply switched off, and within minutes, millions of people lost their connection to the world. It all began in 2022. Brazil's Supreme Court accused Telegram of ignoring urgent orders to block disinformation and extremist channels. Elections were approaching, and radical groups were spreading unchecked. Judges decided not to wait. They shut down Telegram nationwide. Chaos followed instantly. Politicians scrambled to other apps. Businesses built on Telegram channels searched for backup plans. And millions of users flooded social media with panic and outrage. That's when Pavel Durov spoke. His statement was surprisingly calm. Telegram hadn't meant to ignore the court, but had missed critical emails. He called it a communication problem, and, in a rare move, apologized. Days later, the suspension was lifted, but only after promises of closer cooperation, faster responses, and new moderation tools. It seemed the crisis was over, but in 2023, the story repeated. This time, investigators were probing neo-Nazi groups' after-school attacks. Again, Telegram was accused of refusing to hand over full data. Again, the court responded with millions in fines and a full shutdown. For users, it was déjà vu. Their favorite app vanished once more. By then, one thing was clear. Telegram was no longer just a messenger. It had become a political tool, a media hub, and a business platform. Shutting it down felt like cutting electricity to half the country. Outrage spread, and once again, Durov's team bent under pressure to restore service. This story isn't just about Brazil. It's a warning to the entire world. When one app becomes too essential, shutting it down turns into a weapon. For governments, it's proof they can pull the plug. For users, it's a reminder that even the free speech platforms aren't invincible. And for founders like Durov, it's evidence that you can resist for a long time, but eventually, you might have to bend. And the biggest question remains: if tomorrow's internet is built on such platforms, who will be the one holding that switch? What happens when one of the world's most freedom-minded platforms suddenly gets a knock at the door and hears, "Where's your address?" In Brazil and Indonesia, Telegram was stopped by bans. But in Europe, the approach was different, and Germany showed that state power doesn't always come from a kill switch. Sometimes it comes from a single official notice. Morning in Bonn. Lawyers flipping through papers, reporters waiting for headlines. And then it lands. Telegram fined $5,125,000. The reason sounds almost trivial. Under German law, large platforms must provide a simple way for users to report illegal content and must list a legally reachable contact in the country. Not a server, not an algorithm, just a mailbox or a phone number where someone actually answers. Regulators said they had knocked more than once. Telegram never opened the door. Meanwhile, public channels kept buzzing. Politics, protests, scams, hate speech. Germany didn't try to crack private chats. It went after the town square. When the fine hit, debate exploded. Parents reminded everyone that illegal content isn't abstract. It's what shows up on their child's phone. For Telegram, the number wasn't just a penalty. It was a symbol. Even a digital empire still needs a door with someone behind it. This story was never just about money. It was about the rules of the game. Europe made it clear: the internet may be global, but every country has the right to demand its own key to the door. For governments, it's proof they can enforce without blocking. For companies, it's a reminder that scale without accountability is a liability. For users, it's the lesson that free speech doesn't erase the duty to keep out illegal content. And the core message is simple. The internet may have no walls, but every country still has doors. And if you want to speak in the town square, someone local must hold the keys. Imagine this. You own a whole city, yet it has no streets, no walls. Instead of roads, there are news feeds. Instead of squares, there are groups and chats, and millions of people live in it. But one day, someone starts knocking on the city hall door. The knock grows louder and louder, until finally, the city is taken from its creator. That city was VKontakte, and its mayor was a young guy in a hoodie, barely in his 20s. The press called him Russia's Zuckerberg. At first, the letters from the authorities seemed polite. Shut down these pages, remove these people, hand over this information. But the bigger the network grew, the more insistent the demands became. He refused to bend. Sometimes he joked, sometimes he simply said no. His network exploded with life. Music, memes, school chats, political groups, everything mixing into one endless feed. And with that growth, the pressure mounted. Then, another sound joined the knocking. The footsteps in the boardroom. Shares quietly changed hands. Ownership that once felt like armor turned into sand slipping through his fingers. And suddenly, the founder was faced with a choice that wasn't really a choice. Bow to power or lose the platform. He wrote a resignation letter. The internet gasped. Days later, he withdrew it. A mistake, he said. Or maybe a test. But the letter didn't vanish. It stayed on file, silent, waiting, like a weapon left loaded. And then the moment came. A board meeting. Polite words, sharp edges. That withdrawn letter was declared irreversible. And just like that, without cameras, without drama, the man in the hoodie was no longer master of his city. The feed didn't stop. Users still posted photos, listened to music, shared homework, but the air felt different, like a public square where the microphones suddenly faced the wrong direction. The founder disappeared, first from the office, then from the country. He left with little more than a laptop, an idea, and a conviction. Messages must remain free. And here's the twist. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. From the ruins of defeat, a new project was born. A messenger built with privacy woven into its code. No board of directors to be pressured. No back door to be forced open. That project, Telegram, would go on to challenge governments, corporations, and intelligence agencies for the next decade. Why does this story matter? Because it's not just about one man losing a company. It's a warning for anyone building a platform, a business, or even a life. Sooner or later, there will be a knock at your door. And in that moment, the real decision will be revealed. What matters more? Control over the city or freedom for its people? And when that knock comes again, you'd better know which door you're going to open.